What's up, people? We are live, but we got to let it breathe just for a moment. Hang tight, hang in there. Like one of those little possum memes where they're hanging upside down. Hang in there. A couple more seconds, and we're good. Welcome in, everybody. It is the Mile High Huddle podcast. I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, my fellow football priest. You know him, you love him, Zack Kelberman. Zack, today, surprisingly, a kind of a busy news day relative to the Denver Broncos. There's a lot to talk about tonight. We're obviously going to get into the head-to-head stuff, Broncos-Texans, a little bit later in the show. But first things first, Wil Lutz, the guy who replaced the last standing Super Bowl 50 champion, special teams, AFC Special Teams Player of the Month. You had the write-up. Break it down for everybody.
Yeah, I think very well deserved. Wil Lutz went 11 for 11 in the month of November. He had the game winner against Buffalo. He had a season-long 52-yarder against Minnesota the following week. He was 5 for 5 in that game. Sean Payton even said we needed him. He gave him the game ball. He was also perfect 3 for 3 on kicks of 40-plus yards in November. So very well deserved. And the Broncos, if you break down the percentage, Chad, of made kicks, they actually have a better kicker now than the guy they've replaced in Brandon McManus, and also cheaper at that. So I thought it was a good look for the Broncos special teams unit, which is number 1 in the NFL still entering week 13.
Really good to see, man. A cornerstone, nay, a building block, of what it takes to really be competitively relevant and succeed and win in the NFL. Is that third phase, Zack, has to be locked down. And even though it can sometimes, it's the least sexy aspect, I guess, of why we watch football, watching field goals and kickoffs, although a great return or a great punt return as well, those are always exciting. But if you don't have it down pat, if the hatches aren't, battened down, so to speak, we know what that's like. We know what that leads to. That's what we lived with from Brock Olivo to
Tom McMahon.
Wasn't there one in between? Maybe I'm tripping, but either way, it feels good. Last thing, I'm rambling a little. Feels good to know Sean Payton was right, that he does what he says he's going to do, and it's coming out in the wash.
A lot of people were freaking out, Broncos country. Not going to say everyone, but a large majority after the week 1 hiccup that Wil Lutz had. He missed an extra point. He missed a field goal. The Broncos lost by 1 point, but he's really settled down. And like the rest of his teammates amid this 5-game winning streak, he has been money in the bank for Denver. So I'm very happy with the kicking game.
Hey, guys, real quick, we're going to get to your super chats, but because it is the very last day of this fine month of November, and what a month it's been for Broncos country. I mean, loving it. We're got to give you the updated, just so you know what you're getting into tonight, the last night for the top 10 Super Chat jersey giveaway, the contest. You guys know what we do. Top 10 finishers on Super Chat in a given month. Their names go in the hat. We randomly select live. Winner gets a Broncos jersey of their choosing. So going into tonight, the last night, here is your top 10. I'm going to be quick about it. DWI guys at 1, Michaela Parker, the Duchess at 2, Zeus McPeak at 3, FA at 4, Naj at 5, Troy at 6, Mike Edel at 7, GLP, Gary Leeds Palmer, leapfrogging up along with Troy to be at number 8, Sherhang tied right there with him at 8, and Coach Chris rounds out the top 10. And then just a couple of the names outside, Sam Bam, David McElrath, D. Porter, Rip Dye, Chris Hernandez, Brian Dunn, etc. So I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that, because I always forget on the last day of the month, and then it passes and, we get caught up. So the Papa Bear, speaking of, here he is in the house with us, David McElrath. So good to see you tonight, brother. Much love and respect. And Buckham indeed. He says, good evening, Broncos country, Chad, Zach, Dylan, and Deacon Scott. Going with 11-6. Love it. Broncos 34, Zach. Texans 20. Buckham times 3. I love it. MHH for life, Denver Broncos for life. How are you feeling, Zach, about, I love the optimism. I love the bullish outlook here, David, trust. But Zach, how are you feeling about this Broncos team dropping 34 on the road in Houston?
I'm not going to say it's impossible. Houston's defense, though they're playing a lot better under DeMeco Ryans, they're not the 85 Bears or 2000 Ravens. They're kind of middle of the road in most categories. So if the Broncos can take to the air, be a little more aggressive than as opposed to chewing in the clock and playing ground and pound football. I don't see why they can't put points on the board. It might not be 34, David, but I do think the Broncos offense will come to play on Sunday.
Agreed. The very first super chat coming in like 2 hours early tonight before we hit the old go live button is none other than a bona fide super chat superstar. Troy, thank you, bro. Seriously appreciate you. He says, wow, I can't believe it's up this early, the stream. I did get it scheduled a little bit earlier today because I had to do some running around. But he says, have a great show, guys. Hope to see some deep balls for Marvin Mims, Jerry Jeudy, and Sutton this week. Let's relegate the special teams player of the week to extra points. I love it. Pet peeve, Zach, when people say let's regulate, trying to say relegate, as far as the context, it's just a little pet peeve. But anyway, yes, I'd love to see some more vertical action, and I think you can make it happen, and you might have to, because even if, Zach, the Broncos maintain this kind of predatory style of defense and take the ball away a few times in Houston, even if it plays out that way, Houston's going to move the ball between the 20s. That's one thing the Broncos do allow. The whole bend don't break thing. They've still been quite good in the red zone, but I just have kind of a sneaking suspicion as I've been marinating on this game all week. You're going to have to score some points in this one if you're going to win. If you're the Broncos on the road, this is a really red hot rookie quarterback with speed demon weapons that are playmakers. So you're going to have to score, I think. And the defense will help you out with, hopefully, Zach, a few well-timed, game-changing plays. But if this offense just says, hey, we're just going to ground and pound our way down the field, they might not be able to keep up.
Yeah, that's what I was saying to David's comment. I mean, if they open the playbook up and stretch the field, I'm sure they can put up points. They have to get Marvin Mims involved. Sean Payton, been very impressed by what he's done in Denver, but his stubbornness with Mims still is kind of a thorn in my side. But you're right. This game, the game script has been in favor for the Broncos the last 5 weeks. It's allowed them to play a little slower, play a little safer. Russell Wilson in the game manager role. But if the game script goes against them in Houston, which it could be a shootout, Chad, where the Broncos might have to put up points. You're talking about a Houston offense. They have a good running game with Devin Singletary, Damian Pierce, but their receiving core, I mean, Tank Dell, Robert Woods, who am I forgetting? There's a few others in there as well. I can't believe I'm blanking that right now. They're like 4 deep.
Nico, what's his name? Well, anyway, on the subject of the Broncos, okay, he's talking about Mims, Jeudy, Sutton. Zach, I found this to be, of late, a positive development. We were lamenting and even decrying the abject disuse of Marvin Mims, the dynamic rookie from the first quarter of the season. It's so ironic that this explosive cat that in the first 4 games of the season was at such a pace, he was well on his way to 1,000-yard season. Like, he was on pace easily for 1,000-yard season. Then that double fumble game against the Jets, right? Then you go 1, 2, 3, 4. The next 4 games, he gets a grand total of 1 touch, 2 touches, okay, and 1 target, 3 targets total in the passing game. But in the last 2 weeks, Zach, Marvin Mims has been targeted 3 times. Now, these targets and his 2 catches in each game, they've been this underneath stuff where you can tell Sean Payton's hoping he can like break one and then he's off type thing. But maybe this is the game where, after they've got a couple of these on tape for opponents of Mims catching it underneath, maybe this is one where they double move and boom, he's gone, and big play over the top.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Maybe they've been playing possum with Marvin Mims to this point of the season, and this is the week where no one expects him to be the number 1 or primary read, and maybe he surprises. But at some point, you spent high round capital on the guy. You've invested a lot in him. He's going to be more than likely your wide receiver 1 or 2 at worst of the future. At some point, you have to get him involved. I hope it starts in Houston. You're muted.
Thanks, Scott. I was thinking it is Nico Collins. I'm going, man, wasn't Nico. So thank you, buddy. The Duchess jumping in. Love you so much, Michaela. From the top rope. Man, I don't know what we'd do without you. You mean so much to us. She says, should we pick up Zach Ertz? Is he worth it? So in case you missed it, another news, it wasn't really Bronco relevant, though it could be, depending on how things unfold. Ertz out. He's gone. He's going to be, he has to pass through waivers, but the Broncos, Zach, could sign him. This is a team that has sorely lacked a dynamic receiving threat at tight end. Could this be an answer to some of the problems that have been plaguing? I mean, Troutman's made exactly 2 plays all season long as a receiver.
I don't think at this stage of his career, he's not the same player he was in Philadelphia, but it could be part of the solution. I mean, at his advanced age, Zach Ertz still has more receptions this year than the entire Broncos tight end room combined. We could talk about Albert O and whether the Broncos should have kept him because he was a pass catching weapon, but that's in the past now. You can't rely on Greg Dulcich. He's constantly injured. He's still not even back from his latest IR stint. Adam Troutman is a jag. I mean, Chris Manhertz is a blocker. I liked what I saw from Lucas Krull in the one game he played in, but they haven't really featured him much beyond that. So I would be totally for the Broncos picking up Ertz off waivers. They'd be on the hook for $2.5 million, but that would be one of those in-season moves that can just boost a team maybe into the playoffs and then help out the offense with Sean Payton.
Yeah, you're right, dude. It's kind of wild. So Zach Ertz, 43 targets so far this season in 7 games, 27 receptions, only 187 yards. He's only averaging a career low 6.9 yards per reception, at least in that scheme in Arizona. It's probably, Zach, a combination of a scheme and father time, but 1 singular touchdown. The Denver Broncos, if you look at the total tight end receptions, I mean, Troutman's got 16, Dulcich has 3, right? So, and then Manhertz has 2. That's it. So I think they could use him, but just don't break the bank. Is he worth it? Would depend on what he's looking for. If he's willing to just come in and compete on a team with momentum and kind of get stitched into how things are working offensively, then I wouldn't hate it. But then again, Zach, Greg Dulcich pretty soon could be coming back.
Is he though? I mean, you can't rely on him. You can't count on Greg Dulcich to either get or stay healthy.
That's for
He's
sure.
He's the new version of Jake Butt. All the talent in the world, but you can't help the team if you're on the trainer's table. They need some sort of plan B. They need an insurance policy. I mean, they've picked up players to strengthen certain areas of the roster elsewhere. Why not strengthen the tight end room, which they could sorely use?
Real quick, I just want to give a shout out here to Big Earn. Good to see you in the chat tonight, my brother, on YouTube. Big Earn. Hope you're doing well down in California, my friend. Yes, indeed. So, Zach, we got a little bit of a lull here. I want to shift gears. Also, shout out to Cooper. Hope you got that homework on point, my dog. Hope your grades are where they need to be. Good to see you and your mom tonight. Really, really cool. Zach, the Denver Broncos in back-to-back weeks have been flexed by the NFL. The Week 15 tilt with the Lions flexed from a Sunday night, which it was already scheduled for prime time, but Sunday night to Saturday night. Saturday night. So what do you make of this? Is it just the Broncos suddenly being, a captivating story that the NFL wants to put on TV for the ratings?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't checked out the other matchups on that weekly docket, but you're talking about 2 of the hottest teams and 2 of the quirkier teams in football, Chad. The Lions are the Lions with Dan Campbell biting kneecaps, and I think they'll get back on their winning track this week, which sets up what could be a pivotal matchup for both teams with playoff implications on the line. I could see why the NFL wanted that in primetime. What I don't understand is why the NFL wants the Broncos in primetime the following week, which is Christmas Eve, Sunday, I'm pretty sure, against the Patriots, who are tanking and probably the worst team in football. And from what I read, Chad, that game cannot be flexed out. That's locked in. So the Broncos, 2 more primetime games this year, both back-to-back weeks.
Yeah, you're right. That's Christmas Eve, and it's Sunday Night Football. New England Patriots at home. Of course, that one will be in Denver Week 16. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun having Broncos on Christmas Eve. Although you and I are going to have to work. Mr. Producer might have to work a minute that night, so, but we love it. We have fun doing this. Ted, my brother, so good to see you. He says, Broncos need to get the third quarter, especially that first drive, figured out to win this game. They've only scored 20 third quarter points all year, equating to 8% of our total. Yeah, this is a topic, Zach, that we touched on. I think it was Monday night, but just the idea that what is the impetus here for first drive of the second half offensive struggles, like they usually kick it into gear come the fourth quarter because you get put in a find a way, make a way situation, backs against the wall. But for a team, Zach, that has had so much success with that first quarter so far this season, as far as especially the opening drives, which is a departure from the way it's been in Denver in the recent past. Is it just a matter of, that's the scripted section to open a game for the Broncos, and that's why there's such a big disparity, you think?
That was my reasoning when we talked about it Monday. They're so reliant on their script to start, and they're great in the first quarter. I mean, again, against Cleveland, first drive of the game, they effortlessly went down the field, put it in for 6. I mean, you don't see many Broncos teams do that too often. But what I also talked about earlier tonight was game script and how it's been positive in the Broncos' favor. They come out of halftime lately, they're either not losing or they're losing slightly. So they can still establish their identity, which is running the ball, chewing up clock, and again, playing in that conservative game manager role with Russell Wilson. But like I also talked about, if Houston kind of forces the Broncos' hand and gets a 10-point, 14-point advantage at halftime, the Broncos are going to have to go off their script in the third quarter, and they're going to have to do what they haven't done, which is Ted talks about here, and score points. If they want to make the playoffs, Chad, and they have a good chance to now, especially if they win Sunday, you got to find a way to score in the third frame.
No doubt about it. This is an offense. I mean, we can maybe not jump right away to the head-to-head, but just a little preview. I mean, this is a Texans offense ranked in the top 10 in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 11 key categories. So it's no joke. Meanwhile, the Broncos, their only top 10 ranking currently offensively is in fewest interceptions thrown with 4, right? Russ has protected the ball through the air. He's got way too many lost fumbles, but only 4 interceptions, Zach. Guess how many the Texans have? Just a wild guess. If you might have already seen this, but just a wild guess, CJ Stroud.
I don't think many. Yeah.
5. So he's pretty stingy with the ball too. And in fact, this was something that Doug, so good to see you, brother. Appreciate you on Facebook showing some support. You the man. This was something, Zach, that Vance Joseph talked about today as far as C.J. Stroud. He compared him to a veteran. He said, quote, "This guy's playing like a vet. His poise obviously is on point. Pressure doesn't bother him. 4-man rush, 3-man rush. He's playing at a high level. His accuracy is very special. If guys are open, it's on their bodies constantly, meaning, boom, there's the ball. It's not luck. It's who he is, etc." So, look, the Broncos, as great as it's been to see, and I love it. I'm not trying to rain on the parade defensively. They haven't really been tested through this. I mean, with the exception maybe, Zach, of the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. No, that's not true. I guess, Buffalo's passing attack, it has an explosive propensity. It hasn't been as explosive this year, but this is one of those games where they basically got to play above their weight class, so to speak, in coverage because, man, these receivers in Houston are so fast, and that dude is, to quote VJ, on point.
The Broncos might catch a break, though. Dalton Schultz, the Houston tight end / safety blanket for C.J. Stroud, he has either an ankle or a hamstring. He's missed practice 2 days in a row, so he might not play, but they're going to get Tank Dell, who is limited today. They're going to get Noah Brown back, the receiver. And credit to Bobby Slowick, the OC in Houston, former Niners assistant. What he's done with C.J. Stroud, I've watched tape of every Texans game. You would never know he's a rookie, Chad. He's playing light years past his maturity level or what it should be as a rookie, and he's making throws that just leave me in complete wow. So the Broncos, they can't take this game lightly. They can't treat him like a rookie because he is not. He is a generational talent, and he's going to pose a major problem for VJ and company.
I remember Slowick's old man. Is it his old man or is it his uncle? I think it's his old man. Bob, as the former Broncos defensive coordinator back in the day. I'm pretty sure it's his dad. Bobby, etc. Phil, down in Tucson, proving Broncos country is not a geographic location. It is, in fact, a state of being. It's wherever you are, and that's where Phil is. So good to see you tonight, big dog. He says, "Good evening, Chad, Zach, and Deacon Scott. I have a feeling that for the first time in a long time, we are the better physical team. Could beat up the D-line of the Texans. Buck 'em, baby." That's with a B, YouTube. MHH for life. Go Broncos. Yeah, I mean, just a quick preview defensively for the Texans. They do play with a lot of intensity and heart, Zach, but their only calling card, so to speak, as a defense. I mentioned the Broncos only have one green area. We're going to see all this here in a few. Defensively, the Texans only have two green areas. One of them, though, Zach, is against the run. And I think a big part of that is they've been in a lot of shootouts, a lot of high-scoring affairs, etc. But how are you feeling about the Broncos matching up on the ground against this D-line of the Texans, as Phil's talking about?
Listen, I'm not worried, and I don't say that with bravado or with bias. I mean, Cleveland, if you look at just that game alone last week, they knew the Broncos were going to run the ball. They stacked the box, and the Broncos still ran, and the Broncos still ran well. I mean, the same thing went for the Minnesota game, the Buffalo game. The Broncos' offensive line is just better than the opposing defensive lines right now. They are playing out of their collective minds. So I'm not too worried. I mean, if the Broncos can do that against the most stout D in the league, which is Cleveland, D'Amico Ryan's unit in Houston doesn't scare me. I'm more worried about Houston's offense versus VJ and the Broncos defense.
Yeah, we'll see how it shakes out. Let me just see here. I want to grab this real quick from our old friend Nick Hale. Good to see you, big dog. He says, my dudes, when is Jeudy going to have a breakout game? Been waiting. Love y'all. MHH for life. Right back at you, my dog. Yeah, he's yet to really have that breakout game in 2023, Zach. And, if you go back in time 1 year, we were kind of singing a similar tune relative to Jerry Jeudy as we are right now, which is kind of not living up to his draft pedigree, inconsistent. And then about right now is when he turned it on and went gangbusters. Now, that was a different scheme, different coaching, different all around him. But do you feel like that's in store for Jerry Jeudy? Because there are some out there, and I think it was Nick. He has something cooking that's going to be publishing tonight. So look for that article after the podcast. But that the numbers, analytics hint that Russell Wilson is about to start kind of opening things up and throwing the ball. If so, I would have to assume, Zach, that Jeudy would be a beneficiary of that. But how are you feeling about it?
I mean, it's tough for me because I want to see a more explosive offense. I want to see a more vertical offense, but I like winning too damn much, Chad. And I don't really care if the Broncos have a more conservative offense. Jeudy broke out over the course of the final games last year, only because there was no other dominant figure in that receiving core. Courtland Sutton did not look anything like he does this season under Sean Payton. 8 receiving touchdowns in the red zone, leads the NFL, also tied for the second most overall touchdown receptions in the NFL. I mean, he is back to pre-injury Courtland Sutton, Pro Bowl Courtland Sutton. So my answer is, this offense only has enough room as it's structured right now, kind of, again, conservative, ground and pound, run first. They have enough room for one player to break out, and that one player has been Courtland Sutton. Everyone else has to take a back seat. Jerry Jeudy, Marvin Mims, everyone behind Sutton.
Yeah, it's conspicuous, Zach. I'll agree with Mr. Producer here. It's conspicuous that Jerry Judy's run of big production in that 3-touchdown game kind of happened in that window where if you're going to get that that 5th-year option, which for him was like $13 million for his year 5, that's when you had to make hay. And then to kind of disappear like this, it's so bizarre because this is a coaching staff, Zach, that knows how to get the most out of wide receivers. I think a part of it is Judy's kind of, as we saw in the first quarter of this season, his emotional constitution. He seemed very rash and erratic and battling with, TV people and battling with Bronco royalty, former Super Bowl champs and all that. And that, I think, played a role in his inability to get things cooking. And also, Zach, the fact that Sean Payton's prioritizing the ground game, and it's just a little bit of a different thing. But if he's going to break out, my final answer on this is, if he's going to break out, it's going to be in this stretch run, because he does have a little bit of a history, even if it is only once. But he also had a game, if memory serves, Zach, it might have been his second year, where he had another big game late in the year, scoring. I'll have to pull it up on his breakdown, but we'll see how it shakes out. Guys, we are at 25 minutes. So we're doing okay with time. We're going to do our head-to-heads here with Broncos, pardon me, Broncos Texans, but any burning topics, get it in the chat. Albert, our prediction, he's saying, I think Broncos win 27-24. I'm feeling good about it. And I'm going to save my prediction for the Mile High Roundtable article that we'll publish tomorrow. But I will say two things. I'm feeling good about it. And I think similar to your point score prediction, I think, Zach, that this is a game that does come down to a single score once again.
I think it's going to be a very close game. I think it's going to be a very hotly contested game into the fourth quarter. And it might be a game where whoever offense is on the field last might end up taking it. If they keep it close, if it's like 24-24 going into the fourth quarter or late in the fourth quarter, I will take the Broncos field goal kicker, AFC special teams player of the month, over the Houston kicker, who I'm pretty sure is coming off an injury. His first game back from injury. So it's going to be I don't see the Broncos getting blown out, and I don't see the Broncos blowing out the Texans. It's going to be another nail biter on Sunday.
Dan, thank you, buddy. I was trying to remember that one other special teams guy in between, and yes, it was Dwayne Stukes. Appreciate the assist on that, my friend. Okay, I'm just glancing through a couple things here. Tight end, a lot of tight end talk. The Von Miller thing, guys, like, it's a bummer, but even though he's a Bronco for life, so to speak, and obviously Zach Von's still very closely, I would say, is invested. It's kind of bizarre. I've never really seen it happen with a player leaving his former team and still playing in the league and still kind of staying as dialed in and connected with all his former team and talking positively about him and like still using the on his podcast and stuff. There's been a few times where he still uses the possessive we, like includes himself in the Broncos and whatnot. It's really cool. But the bottom line is, Zach, right now, he's not a Bronco. He's a Buffalo Bill. And there have been some allegations and things going on in Dallas with his with the mother of one of his children. Anyway, but I don't know that we really need to spend too much time talking about that, even though I've seen a lot of comments in the chat, because he's kind of been through this before. And I don't say that to sound rash or callous about it. It's a serious, obviously, Zach, very serious topic, what he's been accused of, domestic violence, all that stuff. But I don't know. It's just not territory I typically like to spend too much time on the show, especially talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to comment on it too much. If he was a Bronco, it'd be one thing, Chad, but he's not a Bronco anymore. And though I will say, there's everyone's first instinct when stories like this come out is to just is all emotional response. Like, I just want to let that 72-hour golden rule pass and let more facts come out, let the story come to light before we even broach it. Because right now we have nothing to go on except one report of a player who doesn't play for the Broncos any longer. So we'll move on.
All right, let's do the, let me get this blown up the way it needs to be here so that everybody can see it well. There we go. Let's do the head-to-head. And guys, while we're doing the head-to-head comparison here, Broncos-Texans, if you have burning topics, super chats, we will circle back before we dip out of here tonight, and we will grab them. So keep that in mind. But here is, let me try and center this for you. I think I could go maybe one more. Oh, I'm maxed out. All right. So here is Broncos-Texans. All right. Both teams sitting here in the AFC at 6-5. The Broncos are +8 in turnover differential. The Texans are also a top 10 ranked team in that department with +4. That means they've taken the ball away 4 times more than they've given it away. And the Broncos 8 times more. Time of possession, though, Zach, for a team that really prides itself on consuming clock and running the ball, the Broncos are still woefully poor at staying on the field. And a lot of that is from early season struggles and it taking time for the law of averages to drive things up. But it's still not a great area of the Broncos, stats at this stage in the season. Meanwhile, the Texans are basically right there, middle of the pack in terms of time of possession. But as we jump into the offense here, as I mentioned, as you look at the Texans on the right-hand column, that's a lot of green. Remember, green signifies a top 10 ranking. Red signifies bottom 10. And if it's black, that means it's in the middle. So real quick, The Texans are 6th in yards per game, 5th in yards per play, 10th in scoring, averaging 23.5 points per game. They are 24th in rushing, averaging under 100 per game. They are 2nd, Zach, in passing, 276 yards per game. Stroud, or total interceptions, 5 on the season. Fumbles lost, 6, which puts him just outside the top 10 as far as fewest. Then you get to total giveaways. They are 5th in the league, 5th fewest in the league. Sacks allowed, only 27, which ties them right in the middle, tied for 16th in the NFL. Third down, they are money. And you got to remember, too, Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator that Zach mentioned and referenced earlier, this is a Shanahan disciple. This is a guy that DeMeco Ryans, the new head coach in Houston, got to know quite well during their time together in San Francisco. So these guys, they're running a very sophisticated scheme, let's put it that way. And the rookie, is operating it like a pro. 6th in third down percentage, converting 44%. And then red zone, not quite so good. It's not terrible, Zach, but they are ranked 20th in red zone efficiency. Meanwhile, you look at the Broncos, 23rd in yards per game, 13th in points per game. So this is a vastly improved metric for the Denver Broncos just over the last 7 years, just outside the top 10 in scoring. Rushing, averaging 115, that puts them at 12th, just outside the top 10. So, Zach, conceivably, and then I'm serving this back to you, with a couple of solid, productive games, rushing and scoring in the red zone, like this last game against the Browns, these metrics could end up being in the top 10 the next time we circle back even to look at a head-to-head. But what jumps out to you here?
Number one, it might only be 13th, but if you recall, under Nathaniel Hackett, before he got fired, in those games, the Broncos averaged, I think it was 15.4 points per game. So they're a full touchdown plus an extra point better than they were under Hackett. That is a quantum improvement. That's part of the reason why the Broncos have been successful on this winning streak. But I'm more, we talk about the Broncos every podcast. Now we're breaking down the opponent, and I'm just so impressed by what the offense has done with the rookie. I mean, when you're averaging almost 6 yards per play, 5th in the NFL, when you're 2nd in the NFL in passing, and it's not just because it's in garbage time or it's any sort of altered stat. I mean, they're doing it legitimately. Also, third down percentage, when you're 6th in the NFL, 44% with a rookie quarterback throwing to a random assortment of receivers, one of which being a rookie. I couldn't be more impressed by what Slowick and Stroud have done. And that's why I said my concern with this game is not the Broncos on offense, it's the Broncos on defense.
Indeed. For what it's worth, all right, and keep in mind, those last 2 games of last season, Nathaniel Hackett was not around, and they did play better than they had up to that point. So, but the Denver Broncos finished 2022, Zach, averaging as a team 16.9 points per game, which ranked them, of course, dead last. So this is a vast, vast improvement. And combined with what we're going to look at next, as far as the defense and the takeaways, it's been a winning recipe. But a couple things here, Zach, that really need to improve in this game in particular is, keep protecting Russ. They did a pretty good job of that last week. Myles Garrett was shut out. He did get banged up in the second half, but they did a good job of keeping Russ protected. But these sacks still are ridiculously high. Third down percentage, bump those numbers up a little, get into the top 10. And then red zone, they're about right where the Texans are, just behind the Texans, in fact, in ranking. So those are going to be key metrics as always in Houston. All right, let's look at the defense here. The Broncos, still all this red in the yards per game, the yards per play, points, rushing, passing. This, Zach, is still the vestiges of week 3 in Miami. You guys got to remember, 70 points, there's only 17 total frames with which to, start averaging out whatnot. And the same with the yardage. I'm trying to remember, Zach, was it 750? Something like that?
Yes, Miami, yes, 720, okay. 750.
So this is why you're still seeing these ridiculously poor top 5 statistics defensively for the Broncos. If you were to go back and measure it, and I know Eric has written about this and whatnot, from basically the week 6 on, was week 7, whatever that first Chiefs game was. So the loss to the Chiefs. To this point, the Broncos are top 10 in a lot of these stats. It's almost like, Zach, 2 different teams in one single season. But you look at the green areas for this Broncos defense, and obviously they lead the league currently in takeaways. 12 fumble recoveries, 22 total takeaways, 10 interceptions, just outside the top 10 in third down and red zone. They could crack that if they play inspired ball against Stroud. As far as the Texans go, though, look, they're barely outside the bottom 10 in yards per game. They are bottom 10 in yards per play. Points per game, they're barely in the top half of the league. But here's their calling card, as I mentioned earlier. They have done well stopping the run, though, again, a lot of that is just kind of game flow and how things have worked out. Passing, they're terrible against the pass, which is another reason why, Zach, this could be one of those pivot points for Peyton where he starts opening things up, because there are going to be opportunities. They only have 8 interceptions, which ties them for 20th. 7 fumble recoveries, though, which puts them in the top 10. 15 takeaways, 24 sacks, not very many. I mean, one more than the Broncos. They're 42.2% on third down, which puts them in the bottom 10. And they're solid. They're exactly middle of the pack in red zone. So what jumps out to you here, Zach?
Well, you're right. A lot of the stats on the Broncos side can be traced back to week 3, but there's one stat there that can't and has to get better. And that's sacks. 23 sacks. They're tied for 26 in the NFL. And there's been multiple games this season, Chad, where the Broncos have recorded 0 sacks. Week 1 against Jimmy G stands out the most, but they've gotten pressure. They've hurried the quarterback. They've obviously forced the takeaways, but you're going to start a stretch now where you're facing either young or turnover-prone quarterbacks. Jared Goff coming up. You have CJ Stroud, a rookie. Whoever's starting for the Patriots in a few weeks. Justin Herbert, who, if you rattle him, can be forced into a mistake. They have to get to the quarterback, get home, and finish those plays. That's the only real gripe, that and the rushing defense I have for Denver.
It wouldn't surprise me, Zach, if this is a game. We heard, I mentioned it earlier, Vance Joseph talking about CJ Stroud and saying, hey, man, just poise. He doesn't flinch in pressure, 3-man, 4-man, etc. Wouldn't surprise me if this is a game where they throw some numbers at CJ Stroud and really just hope to God that their corners can hold up in coverage, because that might be how you have to battle kind of fire with fire against this team. Strategically, obviously, not doing it willy-nilly and with total reckless abandon. But let's move on here. Special teams. The Texans are really good at stopping punt returns and kickoff returns. They're 4th and 5th in the NFL in those 2 areas. They're 4th in stopping punt returns, 5th in actual kickoff returns. So my bad on that. Broncos, meanwhile, Zach, if they could get an improvement on their punter,
yeah,
everything else is top 10. I mean, they're first still in punt return and kick return average. Thank you, Marvin Mims. And their coverage units continue to be solid and disciplined. 6th covering punts, 4th covering kicks, and then the reigning special teams player of the month, top 10 in terms of field goal percentage. So anything that jumps out to you here?
I'd love to see like the Jaguars game release packet to see what their field goal percentage is, because I'm pretty sure the Broncos have a better and more reliable kicker this year with Wil Lutz than they had under the late year Brandon McManus. But you're right. The only thing that really is a gripe here is the punting. Riley Dixon is not him. Marvin Mims is him. Ben Kotwika is him. Mike Westhoff is him. I mean, it's 99% good. The only 1% that's bad is, like you mentioned, the punting game.
So, Brandon McManus, you ready for this, Zach?
Yeah, hit me.
23 field goals made on 26 attempts, good for an 88.5% field goal.
Here we go.
So, yeah, the Broncos, it's a net gain. All right, last thing on the head-to-head, penalties committed. The Broncos still in the bottom 10, but they're rising. More disciplined ball has definitely helped. And Zach, they've officially slipped from their perch of being the team whose opponents commit the most penalties. They're now tied for 2nd. And meanwhile, the Texans are basically middle of the pack average when it comes to penalties committed. and opponent penalties committed. So one last thing here before we dip on out, a quick perusal of the key stats for the Texans. Their leading tackler is linebacker Blake Cashman, 76 tackles. Singleton leads the Broncos with a whopping 108 already. And just think, Zach, if he wasn't missing as many tackles as he has this year, I mean, he might be at like 125, 130, maybe even more. It's insane, this dude's ability to tackle and just stack volume there. Sacks, there you go. Benito leads the Broncos with 7, Greenard with 7. Cooper has 5.5, Allen 3.5. Interceptions, both teams are led by players with 3. And let's see, receiving, here's where it's going to start getting a little ski-wampus. Nico Collins has 800 receiving yards already. Dell has 709. The 2 leaders in Denver, Cortland Sutton has 560. So he's on pace, Zach, Cortland Sutton, to finish with just under 1,000 yards receiving at his current pace. Jeudy, 440 yards. He's going to, on pace anyway, to come in well under 1,000. And then rushing, Williams has 538. Singletary in Houston has 489. And then look at the passing yardage difference here. Literally about 1,000-yard difference here, a little bit more than that in favor of CJ Stroud. So there you have it. Grady, thank you, bro. Appreciate that super chat, my friend. Go Broncos indeed. It's a great time to be a Broncos fan right now.
Yes, it is.
I'm looking. What, the dog? I don't know. Oh, look at the chat. Sorry. Yo, Grady, my dog. Thank you for breaking the ice as a super chat superstar. You are a prince. Stick around, connect with us on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. It's another great way to keep the conversation going, my friend. And just don't be a stranger either way. Thank you for your support. Really means a lot. Tucson Phil again saying, man, I think it's been 8 years since we won 5 in a row. And that year we went to the Super Bowl. Just saying. Yeah, it's been a minute since Broncos fan have tasted anything close to this. It's been a minute. And it's definitely been since 2016, Zach, since they were competitively relevant down the stretch. They ended up barely just missing out on the playoffs that year at 9-7, but at least, Zach, Gary Kubiak's swan song before he resigned, they were at least competitively relevant with 2 young quarterbacks.
I mean, every season that I've been a part of covering this team, it's been over by Thanksgiving, Chad. They haven't even played competitive December football. Well, the Broncos pretty much have a playoff game coming up in Houston. If they win this and go to 7-5 and hold that tiebreaker over Houston and a couple other teams as well, including Buffalo, you're going to have to start talking about the Broncos as a playoff favorite. And you're going to have to start talking about the Broncos as a team that no one, I don't care if you're Kansas City, Miami, no one is going to want to play come early January.
Just because I'm of a mind to, I kind of want to grab this from Arthur.
Please. Thank you.
Chad and Zach were talking smack about the Broncos and Coach Payton. Today, they're all in for the Broncos. This goes to show they're mediocre. So, guys, we want to see the Broncos succeed. Actually, you know what? Go ahead, Zach. Let's see what the Dragon has to say. I'm going to go ahead and unleash him here.
No, I mean, Chad, we've been doing this long enough. I've been doing this long enough where my skin has gotten a lot thicker over the years. I ignore so much just trolling on social media and YouTube comments and this and that, but I can't ignore something that's so patently false, that's so ignorant, kind of like Arthur's grammar there, Chad, using the wrong there. We, on this podcast, I can only speak for us or only speak for myself, even at the lowest point of the Broncos season when they lost to Nathaniel Hackett, we were on here defending Sean Payton, defending Russell Wilson. You will not find 2 bigger proponents of both those men than Chad and I. Now, I'll speak for myself. Did I want VJ fired? 1,000%. I wanted him fired when he got hired again by the Broncos. Did we think that maybe the Broncos are going to look to play for draft position if the season went down a drain? Did we think they would look toward the future? Yes, absolutely. But we stood by Sean Payton because we saw even in the losses, even in the preseason games, even in training camp, even in OTAs, that an adult was back in the building and the culture was shifting. So we never got off that bandwagon. We've been driving that bandwagon, and I feel stupid in a sense giving this comment my attention because I've been so much better at trying to ignore them, Chad, but you can't ignore them all.
Well said, though, my friend. Colby, the Triple C in the house on Facebook. Bro, so good to see you. Thank you. He says, is this the biggest, most meaningful game since Super Bowl 50? Well, if you ask Justin Simmons, it's the biggest game. It's the most important game because it's the next game. But getting away from player speak and platitudes and cliches, it's very important. You know, if this was Detroit, let's say those games were swapped, Zach, and the Broncos were playing Detroit in week 13 and Houston in week 15, wouldn't be as important because that would be non-conference. But this one is not only in conference, Zach, but against an opponent who most likely, I mean, we'll see, there's a lot of season left to play, but they're angling for wild card, not necessarily AFC South. It's looking like the Jags are going to end up winning that, but also we can't sleep on the Colts totally shocking everybody and leapfrogging Houston. So they've got a lot to fight for too. They've got a lot to fight for. It's going to be an intense rock fight of a game. The Broncos are going to have to come out and not only continue kind of the swagger, intensity, and that belief they've had, but they're probably going to have to reach in for a couple of new tricks in the tool bag here, Zach, to win this. But it is, I mean, Colby, I'll answer you this way. There is an argument for it being the most meaningful game since Super Bowl 50, at least relative to, winning, making playoffs, etc., not draft position and all that stuff.
Well, here's my cheeky answer. I don't think the most meaningful game has come yet for the Broncos. I think that'll be in a few weeks, maybe even the finale against the Raiders, where they're facing a win and in situation. That would certainly set up the storylines pretty well. But to this point of the year, to this point of the post-Peyton Manning era, yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about playing competitive football in December. And this game, the playoff implications are severe. Once again, as it stands now, the Broncos have the 9th seed in the AFC. Only 7 seeds go to the tournament. The Houston Texans have the 8th seed. The Houston Texans are above them because they have a better winning percentage in the AFC. That's where that week 1 game, the loss to the Raiders, could come back to really bite the Broncos. If they win this, they're putting themselves in a position where they can pretty much almost control their own destiny from here on out. If they lose, it's going to put them further behind the 8 ball. And in order to make the playoffs, they're going to have to hope a bunch of other teams in front of them loses, including Houston. Pivotal matchup coming up.
For what it's worth, Indy, they face the 4-7 Titans this week, but it's in Tennessee. Still, it's a divisional game. You never know how those will shake out. But I wanted to grab this from Michaela saying, could you imagine if we would have drafted CeeDee Lamb instead of Jerry Jeudy back in 2020? And that was my favorite receiver. I don't exactly consider myself to be, as you guys know, a draftnik like many of our experts here at MHH. But I loved CeeDee Lamb coming out tonight, Zach. 5 receptions already for 5 receptions on 7 targets for 66 yards and a tutty. So, yeah, Jerry Jeudy continues eating his heart out because he's had a lot of success, Lamb. I mean, Justin Jefferson, who was in that same class and drafted after Jerry Jeudy, obviously is like the guy from that class. But would have been great. Would have been great to see Lamb instead of Jeudy.
In Judy's defense, CD has gotten much better quarterback play and coaching in Dallas. They know how to utilize him, and that's been the biggest difference. I think he's also just more mature as a person and as a player than Jerry Jeudy is. But it could have been worse. It could have taken Henry Ruggs, Chad, instead of Jerry Jeudy.
True. Oh, man, what a tragic, in more ways than one, story. Henry Ruggs. Phil, again, thank you, bro. He says, I just got a feeling that if the Cardinals and Jaguars can hold the Texans to 21 points, we can also. I'm probably crazy, but I think the pressure we get on CJ Stroud is going to give us turnovers, which we will get more than 7 points off of. Hey, man, that's a good way to kind of spin it. And I don't mean that in a dishonest way, but like the positive way to look at this in terms of Broncos Texans is, hey, Cards and Jags held them to 21. Why can't the Broncos? I feel you. But this is a game where The Texans are going to be, I'll say, equally motivated in this sense with the Broncos to come out on top. So it's going to be a rock fight, but I do like the Broncos in this.
But it's also a game like we talked about and broke down. I mean, the Texans don't turn the football over or at least throw interceptions that often. And I said on either the Gut Reaction or Monday's episode, there's going to be a time where the Broncos defense faces an opponent who doesn't turn the ball over, and they have to prove they can still win games without winning the turnover battle or without the ball bouncing in their favor. I want to see that on Sunday. I mean, CJ is going to play a surgical type game. They're going to have a game plan that kind of negates the Broncos' best attributes on defense. And if they don't turn it over, I want to see the same tenacity. I want to see the same see ball, get ball mentality they've had the last 5 weeks. And also, it'd be nice, sack the freaking quarterback once in a while.
Amen. Amen. Phil, love you, big dog. I wanted to, I see one from Miguel I want to grab real quick, and then we'll probably dip on out of here after we also say thank you to the Ronk. Does Denver have the head-to-head against Kansas City? So the tiebreaker. Well, let's just first establish this. All right, I'm going to do a quick share screen. We got a minute or so. We're good. I'm going to first establish. Wrong one actually. Hold on. Stop sharing. Do a different one. I'm going to read to you guys how the tiebreakers work in the NFL real quick. Okay, so first though, you got to have a you got to know where things are at in the division. So Chiefs are 8-3, Broncos are 6-5, and they split. All right, so getting to the NFL tie-breaking, two clubs head to head, the best one-loss tied percentage in games between the clubs. All right, so they're 1-1. That's a tiebreaker. That's already a split. The best one-loss percentage in games played within the division. Okay, so division comes up next. I'm not sure exactly, Zach, off the top of my head, what the Chiefs are in division other than the one loss. Do you know off the top of your head?
They beat the Raiders last week. Have they played the Chargers yet?
Yeah. Here, let me look. Let me pull something up real quick. Let me go to their schedule. Stand by. One sec, guys. I promise this will be good stuff, good information. Let me go to schedule.
I think the only loss they have in the division is the Broncos.
Okay, so they are 1-0, 2-0, 2-1. Okay, so they are 3-1 in the division as it stands right now, Zach, and the Broncos have lost 2, so they are 1-2, right? The Broncos are 1-2, 3 division games because you've got 3 more left to go. Okay, so there's that. As it stands, Chiefs got them beat in the overall standings and in division. But let's say they end up tying there too, then it becomes best percentage in games played in conference. Okay, if you get tied there, it's strength of victory in all games, strength of schedule in all games. I mean, there's literally 12 points of tie breaking. That ultimately, if it comes down to it, Zach, the last one, and this is literally on the NFL books, is a coin toss.
Yeah.
So there you have it, gang. The Ronk in the house. Love you, bro. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. I don't know what we'd do without you either, my friend. Keeping the conversations going night after night, the positivity on social media and in the chat. But Miguel, bottom line is, dude, on tiebreakers is, we need to see the Chiefs lose 2 more before it even matters. And the Broncos, for what it's worth, can't lose in that same window of time. So, but guys, we got a couple messages for you here, and then we're going to dip on out.
Another tremendous installment of the MHH podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on Twitter/X at the MHH pod. You can follow the main account at Mile High Huddle. Chad's at Chad and Jensen. I'm at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producers, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some MHH merch like we're always rocking each and every podcast, check out MHHmerch.com and get yo swag on. If you haven't, please drop us a like at Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. You can find us on Instagram at Mile_High_Huddle. And make sure you're leaving your football priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every month. That's a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, please, boys and girls, subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you.
Amen to that. A shout out to these great Super Chat superstars and supporters tonight. Troy, David, Ted, the Duchess, Doug, Phil, Grady, the first timer, popping his cherry, Colby, and the Ronk. I wanted to grab this too. Really appreciate you, Nick. Says Chad, Zach, you guys have the best sports podcast out there. Thank you, bro. So excited for the upcoming games. What a great storybook season this has already been. Much love. Well, thank you very much. We do very well, obviously, on YouTube. Thanks to you guys. For a little itty bitty podcast that only covers one team, last time I looked, was a week and a half ago, Zach, we're top 50 on American sports podcasts on Apple. But that's a testament to consistency and you guys showing up, being with us live, downloading on Apple, giving us the 5-star reviews. It all adds up. So thank you, Nick. Love you guys. We'll be back, of course, for the gut reaction on Sunday, Zach and I. But don't forget, tomorrow morning, you got Legends of Mile High. About lunchtime is when the Mile High Roundtable will publish, so you'll get to see our exact predictions plus a score. And then Dove Valley Deep Divers tomorrow night, Orange and Blue View Saturday night. Then we'll be back with you Sunday. Can't wait. Have a great weekend, guys.
Again, as Chad echoed, have a great weekend. We'll see you Sunday for the gut reaction. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.